Today we're going to talk about money and business in the virtual world. Why virtual? Because the traditional business tend to be more mature and market is efficient there. Money is shifting away from the traditional business into the new age. It's harder to make money in the traditional business while the wealth is shifting away from it. We are going to study how to do it, what is the success case, and who and how. And let's make a comparison between the real world versus virtual one. For example, if we want to buy a property and there's a Bank of America tower, it's very expensive. And equivalently, you would have a virtual, what we call domain. You have a very premium domain there, but you really need a lot of money to think about your business there. So that's not the scope of our study here. We're going to focus on something you can manage. For example, we focus on the lower end property versus there's a 4-letter domain. Relative cheaper that you can actually own it. So let's compare the real versus the virtual. If you want to buy it, for example, in the real situation, you buy your house, you really have to follow the rule here called the location and location. And versus in the virtual world, if you buy a domain, you really have to follow the shorter and shortest. And what you should not buy is you should not buy a house in the desert. In the domain equivalently, you should not buy anything with a dash or anything with a number in it. And let's look at the risk. You may have an earthquake, global warming, and people may move to Mars. And those are the risks. And equivalently, in the virtual world, you could have a different extension. For example, we only want to own a .com, and then there's a .net, .org, and other extension will come along. And you may be scared, say, there are so many extensions, what is the risk? And currently, you can have a anything, and maybe in the future, you won't have a domain. But do you still want to invest in the domain? Looking back is easier. Looking future, always harder. And you really have to look at the supply and demand. This is we have an example, 4-letter. You have 4 different letters. You can have a different permutation. So how many of this permutation of 4-letter can you have? So that is exactly, each letter could have 26 characters, and you multiply them, the total is 450,000. That's the total number of unique domains you could have. The supply is really limited. Out of those total supply, a domain either could be free available to register or already owned by a domainer or by an end user. But the trend is the end user is going to buy some domain from domainers. Therefore, the supply is shrinking. Furthermore, a free available, you could have an event we call the buyout. We'll look at this later. Number of domains held by domainer is shrinking, held by end user is growing. So available supply actually still keep shrinking. So let's look at the demand. The demand is growing. I don't really have to say anything. You know the demand is growing. And I will show you the historical data as well. So this is really our big picture. Do you have a confidence to make investment in this domain? Let's look at the day, November 2nd. That's a really very exciting day. November 2nd, 2007. The vertical is number of free domains to register. The horizontal line is the date. And look at this date. At this time, November 2nd, 2007, there are 0 domains you can register for free. This day is called our buyout day. If you made an investment before the buyout day, you will be rewarded. But even after this date, because people have a doubt of whether the buyout will hold, you still can make money after this date. Suppose you are convinced that the supply is shrinking and the demand is growing and you want to buy. And how do you do it? And you really need to study the numbers. So there are English letters here and they have a different frequency. You may think you are familiar with the frequency because you play a Scrabble game, but it could be still somewhat different. People divide this into 3 different categories. One is called the premium letters. Those are the list of most frequent letters in the domain. the least frequent are those 4. Of course, if you are Chinese, and those are not, but still statistically, those are still not good letters. Those 5 are in the middle. So when you buy it, make sure you get a good letter. Of course, you pay a little bit more, but that's the homework you need to do. This is a part of a trade secret, how those letters will play. And there are a lot of people have this trade secret. Of course, I'm not telling you the secret here either. And most important, when you buy a domain, you do not think you like it because you are not buying it for yourself. You are buying it because there are more demand. You are buying it because someone else may like it. You really need to collect data and have a spreadsheet, really study those big players. And I will show you some data. If you look at the starting even a year earlier, the premium letter domain was already set as a $60. I'm covering the username and the name of the domain so that we don't have a privacy problem. This column is the winning bid. This is still the date before the buyout. Even though we are very close to the buyout, people still were not as confident. You see, the winning bid is still around the minimum, the minimum price. Whenever there are more drops, whenever you have a more available domains, people are not as confident. They think, oh, maybe something wrong. So even it's a few months before the buyout, you still can buy a lot of domains cheaply. You still can buy a lot of domains. And once you get to September, then it's harder. The September, you really have to get $100 or so. Occasionally, you could get a cheaper one, but the price significantly increasing. Coming October, it gets really harder and harder. People are rushing to the land rush. November 2nd, that was the day. You still can get a premium letters domain, but then afterwards it's really getting hard. Those are domains not all premium. There's one of the letters are mid-end. That's already reached to 59. And then the premium letter reached almost $200. After the initial 200 high, a year later it backed down a little bit. This is 2008. It's around 170. So what you really need to do is this section is the username. You dump this whole data into your database and sort it. Gradually, you will see who are those users and who is information. The well-known one are buy domains. You need to study why they are making money, where they spend so much money. Through this analysis, I was also able to find 2 of my competitors, talk to them, and gradually we became a real-life friends. And that's very important because without your support group, and even after the buyout, you may not have a confidence how long the buyout hold. So far, it holds up to today, but you really didn't have a confidence. Fewer people have a confidence. Real-life friends are someone you can discuss. Internet is relatively cheap. Therefore, legal aspect could be cheap as well. If you own a domain, someone want to take it away from you, and they may just need to spend $1,500 to prove a 3 element. It's not as easy to prove because that person has to prove all 3 elements are true. Now, someone cannot just take your domain, keep filing dispute. And here's one item here called a reverse domain hijacking. When you defend your domain, you can use this as your counter measurement. I have once used this counter measurement called reverse domain hijacking when obviously someone was trying to take domain away from me. I used the reverse domain hijacking to counter sue him. Even though I won my case, and this particular item was not granted because it was not easy to prove. For the sale, a domainer can sell a domain to another domainer. Market is pretty efficient, so there's not much price variation, and it's really a low reward for the time you spend. Because of a risk, you only do this for short term. Most big players don't usually do this. The sale to an end user, on the other hand, is pretty good. That's where most big players make all the money. Market is inefficient. The only thing is when you do your homework, how do you verify it's correct? It's all about sampling data about the probability. For example, if you have one domain, you may have to wait for 20 years until you have a sale to an end user. But if you have a 20 domain, you may have just wait 1 year. It's really a high reward for the time you spend, but you really have to hold for the long term.